Have you ever looked at the price of something and just thought, how can they possibly charge that much? Well, today we're pulling back the curtain on one of the biggest concepts in economics, the monopoly. We're going to break down how one single company can dominate a market, what their playbook for setting prices looks like, and what it all means for you and me. Let's dive in.
So let's kick things off with a question that gets right to the heart of this. Think about Microsoft Windows. To make one more copy of it, to burn it on a disk or to let someone download it, the cost is next to nothing. A few bucks maybe. So why in the world has it sold for over $100 for years? The whole answer is wrapped up in that one word, monopoly. Microsoft has the market power because they have the exclusive right to sell it.
And this right here is the fundamental difference, the big split. On the one hand, you have a firm in a competitive market. We call them a price taker. They have to accept whatever the market price is, so their demand curve is just a flat, horizontal line. But then you have the monopoly. They're a price maker. Since they are the market, their demand curve looks like any normal demand curve. It slopes down. And that little detail, that downward slope, means they have the power to choose their price. That changes absolutely everything.
So here's our game plan. First, we'll nail down exactly what a monopoly is. Then, we'll get into the nitty-gritty of how they set their prices. After that, we'll look at the cost to society as a whole, explore a really clever strategy called price discrimination, and finally, we'll see how governments try to keep these giants in check.
Okay, so Section 1. What exactly is a monopoly? Well, the simple definition is it's a firm that's the only seller of a product that doesn't have any close substitutes. But the real question, the important one, is why? Why doesn't another company just jump in? The answer is something called barriers to entry.
And these barriers, they basically come in three main flavors. First, a company might just own a key resource. The textbook example is De Beers, which for the longest time controlled most of the world's diamond mines. Pretty hard to compete with that. Second, the government can step in. Think about patents. A drug company invents a new pill and the government gives them a patent, an exclusive right to sell it for 20 years. That's a government-created monopoly. And third, sometimes the production process itself creates a barrier, which leads to a really special case.
And that special case is called a natural monopoly. This happens when a single firm can serve the entire market way cheaper than two or more firms could. It's all about economies of scale. The best example? Your local water company. I mean, think about it. It would be insane to have two different companies laying two sets of pipes under the whole city. The initial cost is so huge that it just makes sense for one company to do it all.
All right, now for the real heart of the matter. How does a monopolist actually figure out what price to charge and how much to make? This is where we're going to slow down a bit, because the mechanics here, especially for you students, are absolutely crucial. So let's really dig into the numbers and the logic. Okay, let's walk through this table very carefully because it reveals a huge insight. Look at that first row. The firm sells 3 gallons at $8 each. Simple enough, right? Total revenue is 3 times 8, so $24. Now, what happens if they want to sell one more gallon, a fourth one? To do that, they have to drop the price to $7. But here's the catch. They have to drop the price on all 4 gallons. So the new total revenue is 4 times 7, which is $28. So how much extra money did they make from selling that fourth gallon? Well, it's not $7. It's the difference between 28 and 24, which is only $4. That extra revenue is called the marginal revenue, and this right here is the key.
And that little example we just did leads us to the single most important rule you need to remember about a monopoly's revenue. Its marginal revenue is always less than the price of its good. Always. In our example, the price was $7, but the marginal revenue was only $4. Why? Because when it lowers the price to sell one more unit, two things happen. Yeah, it gets revenue from that new unit, we call that the output effect, but it loses some revenue on all the previous units it was already selling because now they're cheaper too. That's the price effect. And for a monopoly, that price effect is always dragging the marginal revenue down.
So with all that in mind, how does the firm pick its perfect profit-maximizing quantity? It thinks at the margin. It asks itself, if I make one more widget, will the extra revenue I get be more than the extra cost to make it? As long as marginal revenue is bigger than marginal cost, it keeps producing. And it stops at the exact point where the revenue from the very last unit produced is equal to the cost of that last unit. That's the sweet spot where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. MR equals MC.
And this brings us to the formula that sums it all up. For a competitive firm, things are simple. Price equals marginal revenue equals marginal cost. But for a monopoly, look at the formula. Price is greater than marginal revenue, which equals marginal cost.
The monopolist still uses that MR equals MC rule to figure out how much to make, but the price they slap on the product is going to be way higher than what it costs to produce that last unit.
Okay, so let's walk through the two-step process. Step 1, the monopolist figures out the profit-maximizing quantity. It looks at its graph, finds where the marginal revenue curve crosses the marginal cost curve, and drops the line straight down. That's the quantity. Step 2, it has to find the price. So from that quantity, it goes straight up, 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 until it hits the demand curve. Then it looks straight across to the price axis. That point on the demand curve tells the firm the absolute highest price people are willing to pay for that amount of stuff. And that, my friends, is the monopoly price.
So being able to set prices above your costs is fantastic. If you're the monopolist, you're making some serious profit. But what does it mean for everyone else, for society as a whole? Well, from an economic welfare perspective, it's not a great outcome.
Let's think about this from society's point of view. The best, most efficient outcome happens when we produce right up to the point where the value to the last buyer is exactly equal to the cost to the seller. On a graph, that's where the demand curve hits the marginal cost curve. But we just saw that's not what the monopolist does, right? They produce way less than that, where MR equals MC. And the result is pretty clear. The monopolist produces a smaller quantity and charges a higher price than what would be ideal for society.
This inefficiency, this gap between the monopoly outcome and the ideal outcome, has a name: deadweight loss. What is it really? It's the total value that is just lost. It's gone. Poof. Think about all the people who would have been willing to buy the product at a price that was still higher than the cost to make it, but they weren't willing to pay the super high monopoly price. Those are trades that would have made both the buyer and the seller better off, but they just don't happen. That lost value is the deadweight loss of monopoly.
But what if the monopolists could get even more sophisticated? What if they could figure out a way to stop charging everyone the same price and start charging different prices to different people? Well, that is the very powerful and very common strategy of price discrimination.
Let's use this little story to see how it works. Imagine a publisher. They know they have 100,000 super fans who would pay anything for their favorite author's new book. Let's say they'd pay $30. They also know there are 400,000 more casual readers who'd only pay $5. If the publisher can find a way to separate these two groups, they can charge the fans $30 and the casual readers $5. By doing this, they capture both markets and their profits shoot way, way up. That's the essence of price discrimination. And once you know what you're looking for, you see this tactic literally everywhere. Movie tickets with discounts for kids and seniors. Airline tickets that are cheaper if you stay over a Saturday night. Coupons in the newspaper. Financial aid at colleges. Even getting a discount for buying in bulk. All of these are just clever ways for companies to charge different prices based on how much they think you're willing to pay.
The airline example is a masterclass in this. Think about it. A business traveler probably has their company paying, they're not very price sensitive, and they need to fly home on Friday. A family on vacation is paying out of their own pocket and is much more flexible. That Saturday night stay rule is genius because it perfectly separates the business travelers from the leisure travelers, allowing the airline to charge the business folks a much higher price.
Now, here's a fascinating, kind of mind-bending idea. What if a monopolist could achieve perfect price discrimination? Meaning, they knew the absolute maximum every single person was willing to pay and charge them that exact price. Well, strangely enough, that outcome would actually be efficient. There'd be no deadweight loss because everyone who valued the good above its cost would end up buying it. But there's a huge catch. The monopolist would suck up every single penny of extra value. Consumers would get zero surplus. All of it would go to the producer.
Okay, so we've seen that monopolies lead to high prices and deadweight loss. It's no surprise then that governments have a whole toolkit to deal with them. And for all you law students watching, this section is right up your alley.
Broadly speaking, there are 4 main ways to respond. Number 1, use antitrust laws, like the famous Sherman Act, to break up big companies or prevent mergers that would kill competition. Number 2, regulation. For natural monopolies, like the power company, the government might step in and regulate the prices they can charge. Number 3, public ownership. The government can just run the monopoly itself, like the U.S. Postal Service. And finally, number 4, sometimes policymakers decide that the cure might be worse than the disease, and the best option is just to do nothing at all. All right, let's wrap this all up with a nice summary table. This is your study guide right here. So, number of firms, many in competition, 1 in a monopoly. The price, in competition, price equals marginal cost. For a monopoly, price is greater than marginal cost. Is the output efficient? Yes for competition, a big no for monopoly. Can they make profits in the long run? Nope. Competition drives profits to 0. But for monopoly, Absolutely. Those barriers to entry protect their profits. And price discrimination? Not really possible in competition, but it's a key tool for a monopolist. This chart tells the whole story.
So we'll leave you with one last thing to think about. Pure monopolies are rare, and so are perfectly competitive markets. The truth is, most companies are somewhere in between. Your favorite local pizza place has a little bit of pricing power, right? It's not the same as every other pizza place. So that leads to a big question. Is some degree of monopoly power just a natural, unavoidable part of our economy? Something to chew on.